and welcome back to the Diligent Woman podcast. This is Angela, Diligent Woman from thediligentwoman.com, coming to you today with our episode 11 of our series on A Woman of Valor Is, looking at God's definition of a mighty woman, a virtuous woman, excellent woman, as is described in Proverbs 31. But looking at her to understand that it's not her marriage that made her this woman. It was the type of woman she was and how she behaved within that circumstance. And that all women, single or married, can be a woman of Proverbs 31. Because all of us can be this type of woman, even if we don't have husbands and children to take care of. God has shown us examples of good, worthy women, single and married, and he has shown us that marriage is not the thing that made these women into those things. They either were or they weren't, and that even a woman who is a woman of valor is going to be a woman who is fallible, but if she is a woman who fears the Lord, her endeavor is always to be pleasing to him. And she's going to understand what is needed if she misses the mark. But then when she does miss the mark, she's going to get up. She's going to fix it and move on in forgiveness and do what she needs to do better the next day, because she has things to do. She has goals to achieve for the Lord that involve interacting with people in all kinds of aspects of life. So today, we're going to look at our last married woman on our list. And today's example is, honestly, it's a failure. But I want to look at it because there are things about it that maybe have some hope, right? Hope of being a woman of valor. Let's remember what our characteristics are that we're looking for. Because if we go back to Proverbs 31, we are considering all of these attributes that are given about this woman. And first and foremost, she is a woman who fears the Lord. The context of that sums up all of the actions this woman does are one of a woman who fears the Lord. She's a woman with a godly sense of self because she knows her value. She knows that what she does is good. She's not ashamed of her offerings whenever she makes them. She knows that her effort has been worthy, and she can have a reasonable sense of that without feeling puffed up and thinking more highly of herself than she ought. She is a woman who respects authority because that's part and parcel of a woman who fears the Lord, right? But she is a woman who respects authority because she respects her husband, and she creates a situation where he can trust her, which means he can delegate authority to take care of things, and he can trust she's going to do those things. She's a woman who speaks with wisdom and kindness. This is seen that she has kindness on her tongue and wisdom. We looked at Abigail in our last episode, and oh, how much wisdom did Abigail show, right? We see a woman who cares for others. She cares about them and cares for them. A woman who is responsible. She takes care of what is hers to take care of. And in so doing, she is a woman who is a hard worker. This woman in Proverbs 31 is alive and well in all of us. We just have to tap into her. We have to tap into the things that God has created within us that will come out as we emulate her and imitate the things that she's done. So these are the characteristics that we're looking for. And we're going to go to a story over in Acts chapter 5. And we're going to look at a few things in regards to respecting authority and submission and what that's not, what that does not include, and what it doesn't set you up for. And also what respecting the authority of God, how even though you are married, that your marriage is not what encases these things. Your marriage is not an excuse for the way you behave. You are still an independent soul to God, equal with your spouse and other men and women in the Lord. And your marriage is not an excuse to do things that are not appropriate. So let's go to the scriptures and see what God wanted to share with us. We need to remember that in Acts chapter 5, we're being told about the early days of the church. People are still in Jerusalem. They are sharing all of their things together because you have people who are displaced. They have come to Jerusalem to worship, but they didn't intend to stay. They came for a time, probably came with provisions to accomplish the Passover and the day of Pentecost, but it's time to go back home. And they don't go back home because they have obeyed the gospel. They have put on Christ and through baptism, and they are so overjoyed in this newfound community that they have that they are all staying, and they are spending time daily talking with one another. And those who do have homes and property are sharing it with those who are displaced because of these events. And at the end of chapter 4, we have an example given of Barnabas, he's not an apostle, but he is one of these encouragers who is also a preacher of the gospel and will be sent out later to preach. But he is known as the great encourager, the son of encouragement, because he's good at encouraging the brethren. And he is amongst these brethren, and he has a tract of land, and he sells it. And he brought the money from selling it and laid it at the apostles' feet for them to distribute for the use of these people. So we have needy Christians who need to have their needs met, and Barnabas sells something that he owns and gives the means to the apostles. Great example, right? So we get to chapter 5, and it says, but. So we know we're getting ready to have a contrast. So same idea, giving of our means, selling things that we have to share with the brethren. But now we have, but a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. So they did what Barnabas did, and kept back some of the price for himself with his wife's full knowledge. So for whatever reason, they decided to not give all of the proceeds from the sale. And bringing a portion of it, he laid it at the apostles' feet. But there's a problem. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back some of the price of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? Why is it that you have conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God. Now, in this part of the conversation, it's really not clear what the issue is. He's laid the money at Peter's feet. Peter knows something is wrong. And his point is, while it was yours, you could decide what you wanted to do with it. It didn't matter. So why have you lied to God? So we know there's a lie involved, and that's going to become clear here in a minute. But it also says that all of this was with his wife's full knowledge. Ananias and Sapphira, whether they decided to do it together or he decided and she went along with it, she is fully complicit. She is a part of the effort. Okay? So, Ananias heard these words and fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came over all who heard of it. Wow. You've got all these new brethren. Something has happened. Somebody was trying to do a good deed, but he lied to God, and now he's dead. So, young men get up, they cover him up, and they carry him out, and they bury him. That takes some time. And then there elapsed an interval of about 3 hours. So about 3 hours later, and his wife comes in, not knowing what had happened. So Sapphira has been gone. She comes back, and Peter talks to her directly and says, tell me whether you sold the land for such and such a price. This tells us where the lie is. He is asking her if the price that they gave and said was for the whole, if that was the actual price they got for the land. He's giving her an opportunity to tell the truth. But Sapphira said, yes, that was the price. Then Peter said to her, "Why is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out as well." And immediately she fell at his feet and breathed her last. And the young men came in and found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And great fear came over the whole church and over all who heard of these things. Okay, so let's kind of, take this apart. You have two people who have already acknowledged the Lord. So is Sapphira someone who fears the Lord? Does she believe in who Jesus is, and has she become a Christian? Yes, because she's a part of this group of people. So she has already done a pretty great thing amongst the Jews, right? It's a Jewish woman who came to observe a Jewish custom, observe the feasts, and then makes this leap into this new teaching, this new way. And she and Ananias are wrapped up in all of this. Everybody's sharing their things. They have means to share. Good thing, right? They want to do something good. Nothing tells us what their motivation is for selling it, for selling the land. We're not told that their motivation was a greedy one for attention, to be seen of men, and all of that in the selling of the land. But there's something about in keeping back the money and wanting it to look like they gave all of the money, that at least in the money aspect of it, there had to have been some desire to look like they have given more than they gave. Because that's the lie they told. They made that impression. They gave the impression by stating, this is how much we sold the property for, and this is what we're giving, as though they were giving all of it. That is the explanation of Peter's question to Sapphira. It was their land. When they sold it, it was their money. They were under no obligation to give all of it. They could have given part of it and been fine. And it would have been appreciated and valued, and they would have been thanked for that. They didn't have to be deceitful about it, but they chose to. And God makes it clear that it was in full knowledge. And Peter makes it clear as, why have you agreed together? Now, I would be willing to bet that these two young Christians, remember, they're very new to the faith, did not intentionally sit down and go, let's test the Spirit of the Lord. Let's see if we can get God upset. Because who does that? Right? Especially in this circumstance. Let's just see how far we can get away with things with God. Assuming the best of all things, they saw an opportunity to do a good thing. Other people were doing that. They wanted to be counted with it, but they were tempted to be seen of men to be doing more than they did. And they told a lie to accomplish it. So both of them are held accountable for this. So we can see in Sapphira that there is hope of a woman who fears the Lord, a hope of one who cares for others, a hope of one who is responsible, right? We see these things in her that could be good things that brought them to this point. These are good things about her. But the respect for authority is where they got tripped up. And this story is powerful because you have a married couple. They have made a decision to do something that is wrong. They agreed on the process to take. And I want to put forth that submission, true submission in a marriage, never looks like going along with sin. Because in order to be submissive to God, I can't go along with sin. And being obedient by being submissive, I can't go along with something that is sinful. God doesn't ask that of me. So there's no excuse here that, well, this is what her husband decided to do, so she had to go along with it. And the story does not bear that out. The story bears out that she is responsible for her part. The fact that they asked her on her own, they separated her and gave her a chance to repent, shows that they are allowing her to stand for her own choice. She's not being punished for what her husband did. She's being punished for her part in it. In God's grace, He was offering her a chance to seek forgiveness and to tell the truth. And Sapphira refused to take it. She stuck with the lie. Again, we are not told why she was. It doesn't matter why. It's what did she do? And here is where her valor failed. She does not have this virtue of continuing to do the right thing even when it's hard. They were wrapped up in whatever motivated the lie, and she kept up the lie even when she was asked to point to her face whether or not this was true, which should have been a red flag, right? Why are you asking me? But she doesn't know her husband's dead. She doesn't know that they've been found out, but they're asking. But she put either money or her husband or both. I don't really know. I know the money is the crux of the matter. She put those things before the Lord and does not show a respect for authority. And she is not one who can be trusted. She didn't do what was good for her marriage, for her husband. And in that, Peter is making the point with God's punishment here that what they were doing would be hurtful to the church if this was something that was allowed to spread. It had to be stopped because, as seemingly innocent as that might be, is that, hey, we just want to give some money, we just didn't want to give all of it. So yeah, but you decided to lie about how much you were giving. You misrepresented what was given. And you made a deliberate choice to do that. That takes away from the good that you were intending to do. Just give it. But I want to show here that she's not given a pass, like, oh, well, your husband did this, so you're not held accountable. She is handled equally. Think back all the way to the garden with Adam and Eve and the serpent. God is very just and merciful to all of them. And He shows that He deals with them all equally, and He focuses on each one for what they did. No one is punished because of what someone else did. Adam answers for what he did, taking the fruit from her. He doesn't answer for her sin. She doesn't answer for Adam having taken it. She answers for having taken it herself and eaten and giving it to him. God is just, and He is merciful, and He had it waiting for Sapphira. But it was waiting for her. And she just didn't take that opportunity. The same door that David walked through when Abigail stopped and was that gap, and she got in the way and kept him from bloodshed. God provided a door for David to get out of his potential problem. Don't go do this. Because he'd intended to do wrong. He hadn't done it yet. Sapphira has done wrong, but God gives her a way out. He's opened a door. Here you go. You just have to take it. All she had to do was admit what she'd done that was wrong. I think that's the implication here. Because Peter says, why is it you have agreed to put the Spirit to the test? If she had said something else, if she had said the truth, she would have not been choosing to grieve the Spirit. Forgiveness could have been had. But she didn't take that route. So in this case, like I said, her valor failed. She didn't have her armor firmly on, and we can say all day long, well, they were young in the faith. True. All of us are at some point. But they knew what they were doing because they acknowledged who Christ was when they repented and were baptized for the forgiveness of their sins. And this is all pretty fresh. It's not been that long ago since Jesus was hung on the cross. There's a whole lot of other people that's had this make an impact for them. They've got a lot of things around them that should be keeping it very forefront of their mind, the importance of what's happening. And it shows that while God is merciful, He is also just. Something in their choosing, because Peter's words implicate that he's continuing to hold on to the lie. That's continuing to go against the Spirit, continuing to go against God. She wasn't trying to get rid of it. She obviously wasn't feeling ashamed of it, or she would want to get rid of it, we would hope. She just held on to it and kept the lie going. And she lost her life because of it. So, my friend, a woman of valor, whether you're married or not, but especially if you're married, when you have relationships that call on you to be submissive, God never calls on you to be submissive to sin when it's your choice. You choose to do the right thing. You may not be able to stop your husband from doing something sinful, but that's not on you. That's his choice. You don't do it as well. And sometimes the way we have to deal with there's ugly ways and things that we may have to do to deal with such things. I personally believe this is what we've been given the church and government and all of that to achieve, is that so there is a way to get the attention of people if they do extreme things that not only disobey God's law, but disobey the law of the land. Your submission is not weight to hold over your head. Submission is your loving gift that you offer in obedience to God first. And it is not about your value. It is about your function. Not everybody can be the general. Not everybody can be the boss. Somebody has to be the one who sweeps up the floors. Somebody has to be the one who works on the motor. Somebody works on this, because you can't have everybody doing everything at the same time. Things don't get done that way. Submission is designed for function. Jesus holds an ultimate role as the head of the body, the head of the church, who has done all of these things to our benefit so that we can be a part of that body. And men are put into a position of authority that has been delegated to them, that comes with responsibilities for how their children are raised and for how their households are run. They need to run those things decently and in order, the way that God shows and the way that He does things. And they have a responsibility to answer for how they tend for their own little flock. And wives are to submit to that authority while they have their own things that they are responsible for, which is being the soldier who guards the keep, who guards the heart of the family, guards the heart of the home. And that doesn't mean literally always necessarily being at home to achieve it. It's just that your goal is, I'm the one who's here to protect that so that He can do His work and I can do my work, so that He can train up our children in the Lord, and I can do my part in that. That's your gift to give, and nobody can take it from you. No one can force you into it and it be true submission. I mean, people can, be mean and cause you to be fearful and cause you to acquiesce to what they're demanding because they're ruling with fear, but that's not the same submission that God is asking of for you. The submission is the same that we are supposed to give to Jesus as to the Lord, is how we submit to our husbands, in the same way that I submit my life to God willingly, acknowledging who He is and that He has a right to the position that He's in. And my husband is not elevated to the position of Christ. He has his own position that's below Christ. He has to submit to Christ. He's got his own people he has to submit to. He has to submit to the government. And if a man is trying to be a Christian, he's going to submit to his wife in many ways. It's not submitting the role that he has, but it is being submissive and looking out for her interests above his own. It's how love works. And we are all supposed to submit one to another. It's just for the function of the family that the father has a role as the head and the mother is in submission under that. I kind of look, we like to use the analogy of a ship. He's the captain and I'm the first mate. Well, he's got the big picture to deal with, and he gives me instruction to pass that down. And then my kids are the ones who are that I'm in charge of making sure they do all the things that it makes the boat the captain's trying to keep afloat, keeps everything going. We all have to do our part. If I drop the ball and don't check on them, and if they don't do what they're supposed to do, the ship doesn't move. It doesn't get to where it's supposed to. The captain can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. And the kids can't do it alone. We all have to do our part, but our parts are not identical. We're equal in value, but our functions are not the same. And we have to remember that, but nowhere is it required of me that because I have that function, that I must function in a way that goes against God's will. And this is where Sapphira's valor failed, because she failed to be submissive to God first. She thought of those worldly things that we talked about back in our episode on married women, and how married people have worldly concerns, how to please their husbands. And we talked about how we have to be careful that those things don't get in front of being pleasing to God. Yes, we still have to please our husbands, but it's not meant to get ahead of pleasing God. We have to please God first. And if what is being asked of me for my husband goes against God, I can't do that. We need to learn from this example with Sapphira that God expects each one of us to stand on our own when it comes to answering for our behavior towards God. It goes all the way back again to the garden. Adam did not have an excuse because the woman that you gave me the fruit. He tried to make it God's fault, but it wasn't God's fault. You can't blame God. We take responsibility for the choices that we make. And in this way, this is how God shows you that He is not a respecter of persons. You are equal. You're not held above men, nor are they held above you. You're equal in the eyes of the Lord. And don't let anybody tell you different. You're not being arrogant and puffed up to realize that you are a daughter of the King, just as He is a son. You both are joint heirs. That's what Paul talks about in Galatians. Both are joint heirs, equal heirs with Christ, who is the Son of God. In the end, we are going to get the same inheritance that Jesus will get. Is that not amazing? You get to have that with the Lord because you're one of His. But what comes with that is an understanding that you are held accountable for what you do. Not for what anybody else does, but for what you do. But therein also lies the freedom, because you don't have to carry the burdens of someone else's sin. Jesus did that. You don't have to. And the Lord has given you avenue to deal with your sin when you know of it. And God is merciful, and He is long-suffering, and He has made a way of escape. Has He opened a door in front of you so that you can step out of sin that you may have gotten into. You take those steps. This woman shows us that while it's a great idea to be a good team as a married couple, they start out as a good team. Doesn't that sound great? They talked it over. They made a joint decision about their finances. They both were motivated to do this good thing together. Lots of good stuff in the beginning. But where they went with it undid all the good. So it should be a lesson for us to make sure that we're not getting wrapped up in what's being done, but that we are being focused on doing what is right. So we can learn from this woman what a woman of valor is not. What she doesn't look like. This is not how a woman of valor is going to make her choices. Same thing with Sarah. Sarah had moments where she's not that. This woman had a choice to be like Sarah and move past the things that she's known for. This didn't have to define her. But instead, this is what we know about her and her husband. That is her legacy, because that's what she chose to hang on to. They allowed her the opportunity to be responsible on her own, and she refused it. I know that's kind of sobering, but I hope that you can see the magnitude of potential that there is in being a woman of valor and the scope of what God is offering you. If this is what defines you because you love the Lord and you want to live for Him. Motivations like this one in Acts 5, where it's something greedy, that's going to get in the way. Be a woman of valor and don't let it fail you. Make your choices. Be intentional. Be discerning. Be purposeful. Be like Abigail and know what God's word is. Know what God's will is for you and for where you're going. Not just today, but what the plan is. What's God promised you in the future? What has He promised to make of the people who follow Him? Know those promises so you can stand on them and be sure of them, and that be your foundation. That's what a woman of valor does. Okay? All right, my friends. That's our last married woman to study. We have looked at all of these characteristics. These are just a handful of examples. There are so many women. In case you ever wondered, there's about 90 women in Scripture who are given stories. Not all of them are their names given, but we've got about 90 women that actually have a story of some kind. Sometimes it's one verse, but they have a story. They did something worthy of note. There's about 90 of those. It's pretty amazing, really, the things that God has bothered to share with us. And there's lots of ways for you to study those women. I would encourage you to take these characteristics that we've looked at and just walk yourself slowly start at the beginning and go one story at a time. In episode 12, we are going to pull this all together and we are going to pull some more scriptures together. It's not just Proverbs 31 that we're hanging our hat. God has given us an abundance of information to show us how to live and achieve being a woman of valor like that woman in Proverbs 31, how to make that happen. He's given you the tools you need. And our next episode is going to look at all of that so that whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're widowed, whether you are a woman who is now divorced and you're a single mom and you have kids and you're trying to train them, whatever your season of life is, whatever your circumstances are, you're going to come to the Lord from where you are now. And we're going to open the scriptures and we are going to take a look at woman's all and see what our potential is, what God says we can be. And it's pretty cool. So I hope to see you then. And that will be, Lord willing, in 1 week. Catch, again, the freebie is going to be below the episode, down below, A Woman of Valor Is study guide if you haven't grabbed that yet. There will also be a link to be a handmaid of the Lord.com. That is the Bible study guide that looks at some of these women and building these characteristics in them. And it is an excellent study for young girls, but it can go all the way up to age 99. It's got lessons for everybody in it because it's God's word and it's good for all of us. Don't forget to come back for episode 12 so that we can take a look at Woman's All and put a nice bow on this so that you can feel confident in being a woman of valor. Thanks for joining me today on the Diligent Woman podcast. Please subscribe to be notified of new episodes and share those with your friends. Until next time, enjoy.